Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Bonnie, and today's video is a super awesome interview with Kristen Jenson. She is the author of two amazing books. One is called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn Proofing Today's Young Kids, and the other is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior for the younger kids. Kristen is super passionate about informing parents today about what can be found on the internet, how to protect our families and our young kids, and what to do if and when our children do view pornography. So take a listen, let me know what you think in the comments below, and you can get a link to these books in the description below. So I hope you love it. Okay, and here we are with Kristen Jenson. Kristen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with you.
Oh, we are so excited to have you. We're going to dive right in. Audrey, you want to start?
Yeah, we'd like you to start by telling our audience about yourself. Are you married? Do you have kids of your own, etc.?
Okay, well, I am married and happily married, thank goodness, although we all have challenges, right? But I have two daughters, and one of them is married and has a little boy. So I'm actually a grandma, and that's exciting. And yeah, so I never thought I was going to grow up and write a book about pornography for children, but that's what happened when I found out that there really is a need for parents to talk to young children about pornography. It is in their environment. They do have access to it because they are on the internet.
Can you give us a quick backstory into how you got into this realm?
Yes. So, how I got started writing Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. One night I was on my computer and I got a call from a new friend of mine. And she had a large family, and she told me about this tragic story. Found out that her 17-year-old son was sexually molesting his younger brothers and sisters. And pornography was involved. The next morning, I woke up after hearing this really sad story and like staying up talking to her till like 1:30 in the morning. I woke up and I just felt compelled to find some kind of um, a book. So I looked online to see if there was a book that I could use, that I could maybe give to her to talk to her younger brothers and sisters. And I couldn't find anything. So I got this crazy idea that I should write it. And because I was, I majored in English and I did write, and I'd done a lot of technical writing. So I thought, well, a couple weeks this summer, I should be able to pull this together. Ha ha ha. And it took 3 years to write it, to test it, to really hone it so that it works for parents to read aloud to their young children. You don't even need the sex talk yet, but you really should start that early. But this is a way to talk to young children, to describe, how pornography can be addicting, can be, a real problem, and how they can keep their brains free from its influence.
Yeah. So, why did you write a book about pornography for young kids? It seems like the problem was with the older kids. So, why did you write your book for really young kids?
So, why did I write Good Pictures, Bad Pictures for 7-year-olds? I got a lot of questions about that, but think about it. 7-year-olds are on the internet. 7-year-olds are using iPads. 7-year-olds are going to school with kids that have iPhones with full access to the internet. And I've come to believe that every school bus in America is a XXX theater because of devices, because of mobile devices. And I know that sounds shocking, and I don't want to freak anybody out, but that's just the truth. So we have to give kids an internal filter so that they can turn away, so that they know exactly what to do.
Yeah, thinking about all the stuff that went on the school bus when I was way back before technology, when I was riding a school bus. Okay, so I didn't even think about today's generation having devices, iPhones, iPads on a school bus. You're absolutely right.
There are so many kids that get iPhones at such a young age, which I don't think that's in the best interest of the child. I think the best interest of the child is to wait, at least until they're, 13, 14 years old before they get a smartphone, and to bring them up kind of to mentor them with technology so that by the time they do get a smartphone, they are prepared and they have proven that they're responsible enough to handle the power, to handle the internet in their pocket, basically. So yeah, so that's why I wrote it for young children. People ask me all the time, what is the right age? When should I start talking to my child about pornography? And I always tell them it's not a particular age. It's when they have access to the internet, either in your own home or wherever they may be. And if that's at 3 or 4, then that's when you start that gentle warning about the good things and the bad things that they can find online. And we're going to, look at the good things, but we're going to avoid the bad things. And that's really why I wrote Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. I had so many parents, both moms and dads, ask me to write a book for younger children. So that's why we have Junior for like 3 to 7, and then Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn Proofing Today's Young Kids is for 6 or 7 through 11 years old, just to help children, give them a warning so they won't be caught off guard.
Yeah, I love that. I also love what you said about teaching them to hone their internal filter. And we're going to talk a little bit more about filters in a minute, but that nothing is as safe as their own mind and their own choices, right?
Yeah, as their own self-discipline. And going along with that, we teach our kids how to act, how to behave, but kids aren't always going to be perfect, just like we're not perfect, right? So it's so important to realize that, if your child gets pulled into looking at something, or if they follow their curiosity, to not shame them. Shame just makes them feel like I'm a bad person. So in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, we basically say, even if you see a bad picture, that doesn't mean you're a bad kid.
Right.
Here's something good you can do when you see a bad picture. And so we don't want to shame them. We want to, and we have to realize that all kids are vulnerable to looking at pornography. All kids. It doesn't matter if they've come from a wonderful, stable home, loving parents, or if they're from, a single parent family with lots of challenges. Everybody is vulnerable because we are all biological human beings, and all children are going to be curious. So get that myth out of your head that only bad kids from bad families have this problem.
Yeah.
All kids are vulnerable just because of their biology.
I like what you said about not putting guilt on them or shame about if or when they see it, because that's something we talked about in our podcast a couple weeks ago about the talk, was that when we talk to them about sex, we also pass on our values at that time. But then if there should be a situation where a child doesn't follow your values, then if you've attached a lot of shame and guilt along with that, then they're going to, have to reconcile that with you, or with their own mind or their own future relationships. And so, yeah, I like that in relation to talking about pornography with your kids as well, because if they've seen it, and you're saying that most of our kids probably have seen it, then we need to help them through that and the feelings that come along with that as well.
Right, right. So there really is a comprehensive approach to raising porn resilient children. And part of it is giving them an early warning about what pornography is, so providing a simple definition. Number 2, helping them understand that pornography can hurt them. Watching pornography, may seem, really enticing or interesting. All of their friends may say it's okay, but ultimately it's going to hurt them. And then number 3, give them a plan of how to respond when they are exposed to it, so they know exactly what to do. And one mom read Good Pictures, Bad Pictures to her 9-year-old son, and wouldn't you know it, a few days later, some kid at school pulled out his phone and showed this child pornography. And he came back after school to his mom and he said, "Mom, I was scared, but I knew what to do."
Oh, that's great.
Can you imagine the unburdening we do when we actually teach children how to navigate the world they actually live in? Not the world that we grew up in,
Or that we wish they
not
lived
the
in, right?
world we wish we lived in,
Yeah.
but the world we do live in. And those kids that have the advantage of parents that will talk to them at an early age, and there's been studies that show that if you talk to your children, those children have less use of pornography later on. Obviously, our children are going to do what they want to do. We can't control them. We can do our very best to teach them, to love them, to persuade them. And that's what I recommend for parents, to approach it as a persuasion, and to not think that if your kid has ever seen pornography or looked at pornography that somehow they're ruined or tainted or, for life. No. But it's as people make it a habit that it can become an addiction that really can have very negative effects. So when you think about your children, think about what you wish for their future, right? You actually want them to be able to have good relationships when they get older, a happy marriage. And although this sounds a little strange to say, you want them to have a fulfilling and satisfying and healthy and joyful sex life.
Yeah.
That's part of your job, is to prepare them so that they can. But if pornography is the third partner in your marriage, that marriage is not going to have intimacy, and it's much more vulnerable to infidelity. And so all of those things, when you look at what you want for your child, you want them to have good relationships, good friendships, a stable career, a good marriage, all those good things that we hope for our children. Pornography can damage all of those. And so let's back it up and start when they're young, preparing them so that we can guide them and be there to mentor them, instead of just putting our heads in the sand and saying, my kid, that'll never happen to me. That'll never happen to my kid. That won't happen. Unfortunately, if we could control that, it would be great. But I have heard of children getting involved in pornography from every kind of family. So it really behooves us to begin early, because then we set the context. It's not, I was just talking with a young mother today, and she was saying, I started with my children, at age 4 and 8, talking to them about, the problems of pornography. And she says, now my son is 13, and it's not at all stressful or uncomfortable to have these conversations. But if you just start when they're 13, hey, it's better late than never, right? But starting when they're 13 is going to be awkward if you've never talked to them at that point. So start young, and then it's just normal. It's normalized, and you can have these open conversations. And pornography is not, see, the thing about pornography is this: it silences us. We're so ashamed, right? We feel that shame. Well, you know what? Pornography is shameful, but it's not shameful to talk about it, right? We need to be open and honest with our kids so that they can have the protection of being warned, and again, knowing exactly what to do. I have another story of an 11-year-old girl. She's in 5th grade. She goes on a field trip with her class, and on the bus, a younger, a boy comes up, he has a cell phone, and he says, "Hey, look at this." Well, she's sitting next to her friend, and she realizes right away that it's pornography. Her mother had read her good pictures, bad pictures. She knew exactly what to do. So she turned away and says, "I'm not going to look at that." Well, guess what her friend did? Her friend kept looking because her friend wasn't warned. She was just totally caught off guard. And that just shows the difference between a child who is warned and a child who isn't warned and doesn't have a plan. So the girl that had a plan went home, told her mother, and was able to process that experience with her mother by her side as kind of her ally, right? And her mentor.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask something in regards to something you said earlier. You mentioned that we're all susceptible to it because we're all, just biological human beings with these urges. So I know that, and I felt this too, the concern that if I bring this up, it's going to just spark their curiosity. They're going to go, "Oh, pornography, what's that? Maybe I'll go looking for it." What are your
Right.
thoughts on that concern?
Yes. And it's a real concern, and I totally get it. But the thing is this, they're going to find it, they're going to see it. It's just a matter of time. So there's like the two plans, right? There's the cross your fingers plan. And that plan is, I hope that they don't see it until the day after I decide to talk to them about it, right? So that plan is the cross your fingers plan, and it's the plan that relies on outward circumstances, and it's the basically you have no control plan. So I think the better plan is the protect young minds proactive plan. Sooner is safer. Kids are safer when they have proactive parents. And when you talk to that child, for example, when you talk to them about sex, they see us all the time take our phones and ask our phones questions, "Hey Google," or "Hey Siri," right? And we ask a question. And so they know, oh, you go to the internet to find answers. Well, that's the worst thing they can do. And so you need to point that out. There's a lot of bad information on the internet about sex, and that's not where we want you to get your information. We want you to get your information from us because guess what? We're the experts on sex for you. Okay, so we're the experts and we want to be your experts, and you can ask us anything you want and we'll work together because kids will hear certain phrases at school and they've never heard that word. Well, they don't want to look stupid, so they're going to come home and Google it, right? Well, if they do, often it's a sexualized slang, and then it can lead to pornography. So we want them to come to ask us, "Hey, I
Right.
heard this." Now, it's not the most fun thing to do to go looking up a term, but better that you go looking up the term than have them look
Yes,
it up,
good point.
right?
Yeah.
So we got to put on our big girl pants and just say, "Okay, I will be that buffer, right? I will be the one that tells you what this means or tries to help you understand." I think if we recognize that kids are curious and we can give them answers, and I can't tell you how many moms and dads have told me that once they've opened this conversation, that the level of trust increases between them and their kids. Because if you can talk to them about pornography, I mean, you could talk to them about anything, really. And they feel that. And kids are growing up in a very hypersexualized environment, and those cues come in and they have questions. We think all this sexual stuff just kind of goes over their head. Well, it doesn't. It does not. And I know because I've talked to a lot of adults that said, "You know what? When I was 5 years old, I saw this movie and it had a little something in there that just kind of woke something up in me. And I started to be interested in looking for more of these pictures."
That reminds me actually that my oldest, my sister-in-law had come over to babysit my kids when my oldest was maybe 6 or 7. And she was in nursing school at the time. And when she left, she said, one of my books went missing. If you see it, let me know. I said, sure thing. And maybe 2 or 3 days later, I found it under my son's bed, and certain pages were dog-eared. And and it was just your typical anatomy book. But I just thought, like, it really kind of freaked me out at the time. I thought, what is this? And I realized, okay, he's just curious. He saw these pictures that he's never seen before of, some anatomical part, and thought, I might want to revisit this. And so it did open the door for us to have quite an interesting conversation at an age that was younger than I thought I needed to talk to him. That was probably 7 years ago. But it really put me on an alert that, hey, he is just curious and he needs to know how to react to those feelings and this exposure.
Exactly. And what a wonderful thing that his parents, that you could have those conversations with him, because so many teens today don't think their parents can handle it. Like, I'm not going to tell my mom what's really happening out there. A, she'd take away my phone. B, she'd be so upset. We have to protect our parents. They don't understand the world we're growing up in. Well, I think we can understand the world they're growing up in if we're willing to mentor our children and be there with them every step of the way, starting when they have their first exposure to the internet, to technology, to the apps that they use. We need to tackle the tech. We need to be willing to go down that road. I like to think of parents as guides, right? We're going to go down that trail first and find out if there's lions and tigers and bears, right? And we're going to go there first so that our children can be safe. But sometimes with technology, we just say, oh, I don't get this. Here, take the Xbox and whatever, and I'm going to let you figure it out.
Sure. Sometimes we'll turn our phone over, to our kid and say, hey, can you help me figure out how to, fix this setting or something? Because they seem so much more adept at,
Yes, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But for example, if your child is at 10 years old and wants to have an Instagram account, you better get on Instagram, and you better see what else you can find there, or Snapchat. I recommend that parents get the same. I have Snapchat on my phone. I don't actually do a lot of Snapchatting, but I know what's there. You should live with Snapchat for a week before you ever think of letting your kids have it on their phone.
So what about internet filters and parental controls? Are those not very effective, or are they not enough?
I would say internet filters are great for young children, but you need to know that they only filter a very small part of the internet. So as kids get older, it's better to have more accountability programs, screen capture programs. So what they have now is the ability with, there's Bark is one of them, and Covenant Eyes is another one, where you basically randomly it will screenshot what your child is looking at, and so it doesn't keep them from going anywhere. It just takes a picture of their screen so you can see what they've been looking at, and you should be open with them. Mm-hmm. We have a filter. It will block certain websites. We don't want you going there. We don't want us going there. We're basically protecting our entire family by having this filter or having this software. Yeah. It needs to be a whole family approach, not just, we're going to keep you out of, we're just going to build this fence so you have to stay within this certain area. It's the whole family that's being protected.
I like what you say about involving the whole family, and it can become this attitude of, we are protecting our awesome family from the evils of the world, instead of, I am forcing you to not go places you might want to go. It it presents a unified front instead of a us versus you kind of thing. And then it makes the kids probably more likely to be on your side and report when something does come up.
Exactly. You said it beautifully. So the whole family is there working together.
Yeah. So I wanted to move on to a question about the fact that pornography can become an addiction. So what would you say to people who are curious about how it actually affects a child or an adult as an addiction? Is it actually like a chemical change, like with drugs or alcohol?
Yes, all addictions work the same in the brain. So if you become addicted to alcohol, it's because alcohol, you're taking the substance into your body, and it is having an effect upon the dopamine. It is having an effect upon the dopamine and other neurochemicals in your brain. So the difference with a behavioral addiction is that your brain makes the drug. It's
I
still
see.
a drug. It's still becoming an addiction, but your brain makes the drug. So this has been proven by scientific studies for years and years. The sexual centers in your brain are very powerful, and when you use pornography to distract yourself from negative emotions, that's when you begin to build an addiction. So when people use alcohol, now there's some percentage of people that once they take one drink, they're addicted. It's like 15%. But with behavioral addictions, we're actually all of us fairly vulnerable to behavioral addictions. So, for example, let me tell you a little bit about the process of addiction, just in general. You have a positive, pleasurable experience. And then and your brain records that. Then you have a negative experience, a negative feeling. You're bored, lonely, angry, stressed, or tired. All of those are negative states, and your brain is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So it sees that as pain, and now it wants to seek pleasure. So it remembers, oh, hey, that chocolate bar was a really, pleasurable experience, or looking at pornography created a feeling of pleasure and excitement in my body. I'm going to go back to that. And children begin to use it as their go-to, way of dealing with negative emotions. So the thing about pornography is that you can seek it out, and there's endless amounts, and it's free, and you can do it anonymously. So if you have a meth problem or a meth addiction, and you could get it for free from your phone any time of the day or night in the privacy of your own room, would you have a meth problem? Yes, you would,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, addiction is scary. And you also mentioned the ways that pornography can harm relationships. But is there other ways that pornography is harmful to kids?
Yes, there's several ways that pornography is harmful to children, like when they're children. Um, one of my neighbors told me the story of an 8-year-old girl who, after her very good parents told her about sex, unfortunately, they didn't also warn her about the counterfeit, which is pornography, at the same time. So she went and looked up sex on her device, and these parents never realizing the material that she could get into, because there are really no iron gates on the internet once you're out there. She started looking at horrendous pornography, and it changed her. She used to be a very outgoing, happy girl. She became very withdrawn. It looked like her personality changed. She was not happy anymore, and all she wanted to do was to be in her bedroom with her device, basically. And so children I believe, can become addicted to this. But beyond addiction, it changes their sexual template. It changes what they believe about sex. What do you want your child to believe about sex, right? That it's something to do when you're, mature. It's something to do within a committed relationship like marriage. It's something that you do with another person to show love. It's selfless. You're always wanting the other person to also, have pleasure. All these things, all these idealized values around sex. Pornography teaches the opposite. And you can just go down them one by one and see that pornography is not loving. It's often violent. Pornography does not make you a more selfless person. It makes you more self-centered. Pornography is all about fantasy, not reality. Pornography looks at people as a assemblage of body parts, right? It objectifies people. And when you objectify a person, then you can kick a ball down the street and not be worried that you're going to hurt the ball. When you objectify a person, it's easier to hurt them and not care. So all of these things are going on where we're teaching our children, porn is teaching children to see sex as violent, to see sex as not connected with love at all, to see sex as something you do to fulfill your own fantasies and your own, desires or cravings. And it's just the complete opposite of what I believe is the beauty and of a healthy sexual relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you were saying if we're the first ones to talk about sex or about pornography, then we get to set the tone. We set the tone that this is part of a loving, wonderful, committed relationship. It should be positive. It should be, full of kindness. And then when they encounter anything that does not fit those ramifications, they can go, something's not right. This isn't how my parents taught me sex should be. And then they're more likely to step away or ask for some help with it rather than embrace it.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is that pornography promises to make your sex life even sexier, right? Pornography promises that. But it's absolutely the opposite. Pornography is neutering, especially men. It neuters them because they're finding, and studies back this up, that more and more young people are not getting married. And they have found that pornography is one of the biggest factors in that. They don't want to get married partly because they've been basically learning about sex from pornography. Pornography is not teaching your child that sex is a beautiful part of a relationship, a healthy, wholesome part of a relationship. Quite the opposite.
Right. That's really sad. And I think as parents, we all have much higher ideals and expectations for our kids and their future relationships.
When you teach your child about pornography and warn them, and again, tell them what it is, tell them how it can be harmful, and tell them exactly what to do when they see it, they are they're safer from sexual abuse because so many adults use pornography to groom children, to make it normal for them to be engaged in a sexual thing. They show them pornography. The other thing about pornography that's kind of scary is that, children are wired to imitate what they see adults do. And children that are watching pornography, some of those children are going to then turn around and want to act out what they've seen on other more vulnerable children. We need to not only talk to our children about pornography so they don't become addicted, but also so that they aren't harmed and that they don't harm other children.
Yeah, that's really scary, but I definitely feel like you hit the nail on the head. It's we're preventing harm to our children, we're preventing them from harming others, and it's a great place to start is with your book. So we're running out of time, but we did want to make sure that our audience knew both about your book, and we also want you to let them know where they can find you online. I know you have a wonderful website to share.
Yes, it's protectyoungminds.org. And there we have regular blog posts where we tackle tough topics, screen accountability, sexual integrity, all of these things that will build children and help you as you navigate this digital environment with your children. So I think that there's every reason to be hopeful and encouraged. Um, Children, there are a lot of wonderful things out there on the internet and a lot of good things. And we don't want to be like, oh, you're growing up at a terrible time. We just want to point out that you're growing up in an amazing time. There's wonderful things and wonderful opportunities out there and to point those out. So I just want to, end with a positive note that yes, there's some, negative things out there, but we need to approach it in a very positive way with our children.
Yes, thanks so much for joining us. We're so grateful to have your expertise, and we can tell this is a really passionate topic for you. And we're so grateful to have you and have you share it with our audience. So thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing me to talk with you today. Thanks.